Ladies, gentlemen, boys, girls, welcome back to SJMMA. Today, we're talking about UFC 299. Of course we are. It's this weekend, March the 9th, and what a card, you have to say. If you're one of these people that usually only watches the last few fights of the card, I'm talking in particularly here to my UK boys and girls that are watching this, my fellow UK citizens, right? I'm talking to you as your leader, right? I'm your leader now when it comes to MMA, so listen to me. Get yourself a kebab. Sit there from 10:30, 11 o'clock, whenever it starts on the early prelims, and watch the whole damn thing. Because from top to bottom, this is one of the best pay-per-views I've seen in recent times. It's a tremendous card. You got to watch the whole thing. I'm going to go through the whole thing, starting at the top, ending at the bottom. Let's go. And the main event, as we know, the bantamweight title rematch of Sean O'Malley and Marlon Vera. Now, the elephant in the room, Marlon Vera does not deserve this opportunity, and he's got it for not reasons that relate to what he's done in the cage recently, let's just say that. But there's a storyline there. It's intriguing. I'd rather watch this than O'Malley against fucking Merab at the moment, so I'm not complaining about it too much. But the one thing I will say is, as much as people like to go back to their first fight, Sean was piecing him up until he got injured. There's no two ways about that. But the thing about Marlon Vera, especially as he's rose up the ranks in the bantamweight weight class, you think about his wins over especially Rob Font and Dominic Cruz, he's made a habit of losing rounds for the most part and then landing something crazy, winning the rounds and getting the finishes. He loses fights until he wins them, basically. Which is quite an interesting thing to dive into, people, really. Because he doesn't have a style that really relates to throwing crazy stuff. He's not like an MVP, who we'll come on to later. He is just always in a fight. And he seems to be able to find the knockout blow when he needs to. The problem is, with O'Malley, will he be able to last long enough in order to find that shot? This is what we've got to talk about. I said this recently about Sean O'Malley. He's a long guy for bantamweight anyway, but he comes across like he's very good at making himself feel longer in the cage. His ability to maintain the distance in between him and his opponent is probably second to none in the division and up there in the entire organisation. He's very good at that, which will make Vera's job of finding that shot harder. And to be honest, I do expect O'Malley to get his revenge and beat Marlon Vera to maintain his bantamweight crown, because I'm not sure if Marlon Vera has the creativity and the ability to live with the mind of Sean O'Malley. As in, you can say what you want about him as a human being, but his IQ related to how he fights is immaculate. Like I said, the range and the distance control is superb. I don't see Vera being able to, one, break that space and keep himself safe, and two, even if he does find a way through, O'Malley is so creative that he could see a flying knee coming. Any strike that you can think of in MMA with any limb, any part of the body, Sean O'Malley has got that in the locker if he needs it. Marlon Vera is going to have to keep himself incredibly safe, which he's not always that good at. He does get hit quite a bit. But if he is going to find that shot, he needs to keep himself safe long enough to when O'Malley starts to tire a touch, and then he can capitalise. But I don't think he'll get there, to be honest. My prediction is a late second round knockout for Sean O'Malley. Probably a straight right hand or a straight left hand, whichever stance he's in, as Vera is going to try and land one of his crazy shots. Maybe a front kick, he misses, and O'Malley counters, drops him, TKOs him on the ground. That's what I think will happen. Co-main event, 5 rounds in the lightweight weight class. The return of Dustin Poirier against the rising Benoit Saint Denis. I love Saint Denis, I really do. Anybody who knows me will know that. When you think about a fighter in the UFC that is diverse in the way they can finish fights, there aren't too many that are up there with Saint Denis. I'd say Tom Aspinall is up there. Charles Oliveira has proved he's got hands as well, but Saint Denis can finish you anywhere, and he normally does. However, it has to be said, getting a finish against Matt Frivola and getting a finish against Dustin Poirier is a completely different kettle of fish. Even though Dustin Poirier's last fight was a head kick knockout and Saint Denis landed one on Frivola in his finishing sequence, you can bring that into account, but it's a massive step for Saint Denis, but he could be ready for it, to be honest. Poirier's an interesting one to stylistically break down for me, because the way I would put it is a complete oxymoron. He's basically technically scrappy. If you've seen him fight, you know what I mean. It's almost as if he obviously has a high IQ, especially with the striking, but the way he's been able to mix that with that kind of Louisiana street fighter that's kind of within him is really, really good. He can out-technically box people as well as swarm them. When I say out-technically box, it doesn't look the prettiest all the time, but he can outstrike people, and he can make much more superior natural strikers look very average. In terms of his grappling, it's okay. We've seen him lock up a few submissions, especially as a featherweight, not as much as a lightweight, really. Saint Denis has the advantage on the ground, there's no two ways about that, but Dustin Poirier is a much more well-rounded striker than Saint Denis. Again, there's no two ways about that one either. Now, before I break this one down proper, people, a bit of credit has to go to DP. because in my opinion, he has been one of those lightweights who has just been kind of log jamming the top of the division and only fighting big names. So taking a fight against a lower ranked guy, I know it shouldn't really be commended because it's what the sport is supposed to be, but still fair play to him, do you know what I mean? In the 5-round UFC 299 co-main event, my pick is Dustin Poirier. The main reason is this is a 5-round fight. It's the first time Saint Denis fought that in the UFC and I believe in his whole career. I could be wrong there, let me know if I am. Saint Denis, I believe, will be slightly more cautious in the first 5-10 minutes than he usually is. I think. That would be the smart thing to do, but I also think it would allow Poirier to get ahead. If you allow him to get into a rhythm, he's very difficult to stop. Now, of course, there is the question of whether Father Time is catching up with Poirier after his last loss, a very brutal knockout. We won't know that until he gets in the cage. Maybe it's the start of his decline. I just think this could be a bit too much of a step too soon for BSD. I'm glad he's got this fight. It's a banger. I think he will have his moments, but I'm going to go with a late rounds TKO for Poirier after a great fight. A brilliant co-main event this will be. I'm so looking forward to this one, beautiful people, as I'm sure you lot are as well. London's own Michael Venom Page, UFC debut time against Kevin Holland. First of all, Dana and the boys, you don't always get it right with the matchmaking. This one, spot on, well done. Little pat on the back for all of you. In my opinion, there is always a concern when you have a fight like this, when you have two long, tall, rangy strikers who are both dangerous and both recognise each other's danger, squaring off. There's always a risk it could turn out to be a bit of a boring chess match. This one, I do not see it in any way. I actually think MVP hit the nail on the head when he was talking about the fight himself. I think the confidence of Kevin Holland could be a bit of a downfall for him here. Kevin Holland is a better grappler than Michael Venom Page. He's very good at BJJ. Under Travis Lutter, great coach. He doesn't use it very much, as we know, and he has been out-wrestled in the past. So it's easy then to think he's not very good on the ground, but he's very dangerous there. Very, very dangerous. But I do believe that Holland will believe maybe slightly too much in his own striking, and he will try and stand and bang with MVP, at least at the start. And like MVP has said in his own interviews, as I mentioned earlier, by the time he realises he has to grapple, it could be too late. That could definitely happen, because Holland, as long as he is and as tall as he is, does get hit quite a bit. There is a blueprint to beat MVP. Shorter guys are a little bit on the stockier side rather than the rangy, lengthy of MVP, who can get in his face, wear him down, and take him down if they have the ability to do so, and effectively kind of take away the space that he's so good at using. Look at Logan Storley, look at Lima, look at Mike Perry in BKFC. Similar thing. Obviously he can't grapple there, but he got in his face and he slowed the rhythm of MVP. Holland is not great as a pressure fighter. He's a counter striker, the same as MVP. And when you got two counter strikers, it's usually the cleaner striker that will win, and MVP is by far the cleaner striker. And for that reason, I'm going to go with MVP, but I think it will go 3 rounds, because Kevin Holland, as much as he does get hit, it's very difficult to finish with strikes. I don't think it's happened in the UFC so far. I think they're both going to have a whale of a time in there. They're probably going to be talking to each other, laughing with each other. They're both those kind of characters. But I think, like I said, the cleaner striker is MVP. I could definitely see Holland having some moments, maybe a couple in the later rounds, but I think MVP will do enough over the 15 minutes to win an exciting decision against Kevin Holland in the feature bout of UFC 299. One of my favourite fights on this card, again, straight before Holland MVP, is Gilbert Burns against Jack Della Maddalena. Again, what a fight. All of the first 4 fights we've spoke about in this video have been amazing. Not just high stakes, but they look so good on paper. I love this card. Whatever happens in this fight, I'm going to be a bit sad because I love both of these blokes. I've loved Burnsy for a while now. I think the ability to mix his world-class BJJ with some decent pop in his hands has been brilliant. I love his personality. He always comes across like a good dude. To see him lose again would be a shame. And I've also loved watching the rise of JDM as well. In my head, he's a bit of a throwback, people. I mean, with the crooked nose and the come forward, massive power in his hands, boxing style, he'd have been great in Pride, wouldn't he? Could you imagine him against a Prime Vanderlei Silva in Pride? Fuck me, that'd be good, right? I love him. I love them both. But unfortunately, only one man can win. Well, unless it's a fucking draw. And it pains me to say it, but I'm going to pick Jack Della Maddalena. I mentioned earlier about the improvements in the power and the striking of Gilbert Burns, which have been there for all to see over the last kind of few years, especially after he moved up to welterweight, but he still makes mistakes on the feet. He can be hit. He isn't exactly the best in terms of a defensive striker. I see JDM piecing him up. Of course, Burns has the takedown threat and the jiu-jitsu, which he used against Masvidal really well, but yeah, in my opinion, JDM's got the best jab in the whole division, outside of maybe Kamaru Usman, but Gilbert, in my opinion, likes to take charge in fights. He likes to be the one pressing forward, which I think is how you should be. It should always be front foot first, but JDM, I think, will prove to be somewhat of an immovable object for him. I don't think he'll be able to land anything that will really upset him. And I think JDM's takedown defence is pretty good. Even offensively, in terms of grappling, he's alright. But like I just said about Dustin Poirier and Saint Denis, this is a massive step up if you're JDM. It's huge. You're fighting one of the elite in your division. And some contenders can make that jump up and get in towards the belt conversation quickly. Some of them falter a bit first. We've not seen JDM lose a fight yet in the UFC. I don't think it starts here though. I think when you look at the two of them, even stand them next to each other, they look like they should be in different weight classes. They really do. There's a big size difference on JDM's favour. And I think Burns will get caught too much early. And to be honest, I think JDM will end up TKOing him. Gilbert Burns got hurt bad and dropped by a Kamaru Usman jab. I could see JDM doing the same, and I think it will be a TKO to ground and pound in the third round for the Australian, who will move up into the top 5 of the division. Main card opener is back to the bantamweights. Former champion Petr Yan against top contender Song Yadong. Again, great fight. This was supposed to happen last year in a main event in China. That fell through, and now here we are a few months later at the start of 2024. Now, I love watching Yan fight. Master of sport in boxing in Russia, you can definitely tell that. Very well rounded. His takedown defence is very, very good. Very dangerous. But he's not been making very many good noises recently. In and outside of the cage. Of course, he's lost quite a few recently. There was even a time when he was talking about going to one championship because he doesn't like the UFC. There was all that stuff going on. It's not been great if you're a Yan fan over the last kind of 2 years. It all changed with that illegal knee. It's one of those what ifs. If he didn't land that knee, how would the division look now? We'll never know. Song Yadong, on the other hand, has been very, very active, and for the most part, he's been very successful in the cage of recent times. Of course, he lost against Corey Sandhagen, but he's only 26 years of age. Let's just fucking say that first. He's a very, very young guy. And I think he can learn a lot from a fight like that. He was great against Ricky Simone, and looked more than decent against Chris Gutierrez as well in his most recent outing. Unfortunately, as a Yan fan, again, I think it's going to be more heartbreak. I think Song Yadong is at a level now where he can jump into that top 5 and he can be a serious title contender. I think he'll get the better of Petr Yan. This is not a good matchup if you're Petr Yan right now. Somebody who can match or even overpower him on a physical standpoint with the athleticism and ability to be competitive on the feet and on the ground. It's not great, I'm not going to lie. Yan's lateral movement is very, very good, but Song's ability to cage cut is arguably just as good. I don't think Yan is going to be able to get into his rhythm, his routine, his ability to land these 3, 4, 5, 6 punch combos. Song will be able to stop him from getting into that kind of rhythm. I think over 15 minutes he'll do enough. I do think it goes the full distance though. But I think over those 3 rounds you could say it could be close. It could be 2-1 Song or a close 3-0. You can have close 3-0s. But I think Song Yadong will do enough and will get the judges' nod in a decent fight. It's good on paper, but I think the fight itself will be decent, nothing more, to be honest. But I'm going to say 29-28 Song. He'll move into the top 5 and then fight, I don't know, maybe a Merab, because no one wants to see Merab fight for a belt. And they've not fought before. I was going to say they've fought before. They haven't. Forget that. Let's move on. On to the prelims we go, beautiful people. And we're starting with a very, very decent heavyweight matchup of Curtis Blaydes and Jailton Almeida. I'm glad it's not on the main card, mind you, because the actual fight itself probably won't be that good. I'll be honest. But there are stakes there. It's a high-rank matchup. I like that. This was supposed to happen at the end of last year, but Blaydes got injured and was replaced by Derek Lewis, and Jailton didn't look great, I'm not going to lie, but you do have to remember, of course, it's very different preparing for Blaydes and Derek Lewis, very different styles, so you can give him a bit of leeway, I suppose. Curtis Blaydes has had a very interesting MMA career, especially within the UFC. It seems like if you're a big hitter and you're a big dude, you knock him out. If you're not, he beats you. Jailton Almeida does not have anywhere near the power of a Derek Lewis or a Pavlovich or an Ngannou even, so to be honest with you, I think Blaydes is going to win this one. I do, I have a feeling. I don't think either of them has the power to put the other one out. Blaydes has a big size advantage which could help him there, but I think this will turn into a grappling match. And again, I'm going to go back to Blaydes' size. He's just so much denser and thicker set than Jailton Almeida, and I think Almeida, as much as he may be a lot more explosive than Blaydes, I don't think he'll be able to get him down. I don't think he'll be able to work his great chokes. I think Blaydes will spend most of the fight on top. Won't be a good watch, but I think Blaydes will win a decision by just kind of big brother in Almeida. And in my opinion, the winner of this fight should be fighting Cyril Gane, and the winner of that one should be fighting Tom Aspinall. Whether that's for the interim belt or the undisputed after Jones finally retires or whatever. But the winner of this fight fights Gane in a title eliminator of sorts. Next up, we got some top 10 women's flyweight action with Caitlyn Chookagian and Macy Barber. Now, I know a lot of people moan about WMMA on cards. I get it. They're not always the best watches, but at least this one, like I said about Blaydes Almeida, has stakes. They're both in the top 10. Chookagian has become sort of like a title eliminator gatekeeper of sorts. She's beaten most of the people she's fought. And of course, Macy Barber is still very young. She's had her setbacks in the UFC. She hasn't won every single fight, but recently she's been looking much, much improved. I thought she was great against Amanda Ribas, I really did. But for me, Chookagian may be a step too far too soon. She's a very tall and rangy 125er. She's got a very, very decent jab in that weight class as well. Up there as one of the best if you ask me. And I'm not sure if Macy Barber has got the IQ to break that down. You can say what you want about Chookagian. She's not exciting to watch. She's not a finisher. But she gets the job done more often than she doesn't. And I don't know if Barber is quite at the level of a Manon Fiorot who could beat her. But I wouldn't be surprised, people, if this is a bit of a stinky decision. I could very easily see them giving it to Barber after most people would think Chookagian would have won over the 3 rounds. I think it goes all the way, by the way. There's no finish here, in my opinion. But for me, I think Chookagian will do enough. But Barber has been looking good, and she is more athletic and probably more explosive than Chookagian, so she could get it done. If there is a finish, which, like I said, there probably won't be, but if there is, definitely more likely to be Macy Barber. But I think Chookagian will win the fight. But it wouldn't shock me if they gave the decision to Barber just out of like, oh, it's a new girl at the top. That kind of thing, which is a shame, but I could definitely see it happening. But I am going to go with Chookagian. Next up, another big name, high-ranking matchup. But again, I don't expect it to be a barn burner of a fight. But still, to have this kind of name value on the prelims is very, very impressive. It's Mateusz Gamrot against the returning to lightweight, Rafael dos Anjos. I love RDA, man. I mentioned him in my most underrated fighters in every weight class video that came out recently. He's fought at 155 and 170. He's gone up and down so many times. Former champion, proper BMF. With that moustache as well, you don't fuck about with a geezer with that kind of moustache. You really don't. Mateusz Gamrot's quite an interesting one. I think, in my opinion, one of the best technical fights I've seen in recent times, which is win over Sarukian at the Apex. If you watch that fight, you know what I'm talking about. In terms of pure MMA skill, across all facets, that was a superb fight. A great showcase of mixed martial arts. But he lost against Dariush. That hasn't aged well at all. And of course the Fizzy fight, Rafael got injured, so you can't take too much from that. He beat Jaden Turner, which is kind of whatever. It's an interesting career to judge so far. One thing to think about in this fight, people, is the low kicks of RDA. I mean, I can go all the way back to his Nate Diaz fight, which was years and years ago now. He dominated with the low kicks. And Gamrot, with the fact he's a grappler, he always likes to be on the front foot. He can sometimes put a lot of weight on that left leg. And those inside low kicks from RDA could really, really do some damage out of his southpaw stance. That is something to definitely think about. It could definitely slow Gamrot down. Gamrot is by far the better offensive wrestler. RDA, in my opinion, is far, far better as a submission finisher. He's got great BJJ, he always has. In terms of the striking, I think that Gamrot's got a good jab. I think the kicking game is all RDA. The punch power is probably quite equal. Neither of them are particularly big hitters, really. They can pop, but not that heavy, if you know what I'm trying to say. My pick is going to be Mateusz Gamrot, but it wouldn't surprise me if RDA pulled it off. When you think about the term wily, crafty vet, RDA is the first name that comes to my head, or at least one of the first names. And it wouldn't surprise me if he could figure Gamrot out. But I think he's starting to lose a step, which at nearly 40 you kind of understand and you kind of predict, to be fair. It's not a confident pick, but I think Gamrot will be able to, interestingly, overpower RDA, which you would think a guy coming down from 170 wouldn't happen. But RDA was never big enough for 170 anyway. He's a nutcase for even trying to fight there on several occasions. But yeah, I think Gamrot is a bit fresher, a bit hungrier. Again, not quite good enough to win a belt, I don't think. But I think he'll be good enough to get the better of RDA. Again, I'll go for a close 3-round fight. We'll say 29-28 to the poll. Let's move on from one crafty old Brazilian to another, as Pedro Munoz takes on Phillips to start off the prelims. He is as tough as a 2-day-old well-done steak, he really is. He's never been dropped or knocked out, I don't think. His chin is nuts, especially lower weight class chins are usually a bit better because they don't hit as hard, but his is just on a different level. I'm pretty sure it's made out of fucking obsidian or whatever that fucking powerful rock is. Phillips is on the other end of the spectrum. He's still trying to find his place in the sport. He's pretty good everywhere. He's had knockouts, he's had submissions, he's had the ability to win over 3 rounds as well. He has got a lot against Howley and Paver, which is not a good look, but his win over Barcelos was pretty impressive, to be fair. Personally, I would put Phillips on a similar level to Chris Gutierrez in terms of ability, and we saw that Munoz still has the ability to turn that kind of opposition away. I believe he will do the same against Phillips. To be honest, I'm feeling a finish as well, which I know Munoz hasn't had too many of those recently, but I just feel it for some reason. I could see a flurry from Pedro doing some serious damage on Phillips, and I could see him finishing him on the ground about halfway through the fight. That could be controversial. I know he's not been a great finisher in recent times, but I think he's still got it in the locker, and I think he'll finish Phillips and stay as a gatekeeper. It sounds a bit harsh, but he is a gatekeeper at this point. Come on. Early prelim headliner will be Ion Cutelaba against Philippe Lins. Now, Lins used to be a heavyweight, and then he came back down to 205. He's won 3 straight in that division, including a knockout of the nutty OSP, who I'm surprised is still signed to the UFC because they pay him a lot to lose, which is not exactly the best business strategy, but we're not talking about that right now. I think Linz is okay. Grishin and Marcin Pratniau are decent wins in the light heavyweight weight class. They're definitely not bottom feeders. They're kind of in that gap in between right below the rankings and the bottom of the division. They're decent wins and they hold a bit of credibility, but I think Kutalaba's too good for him. Kutalaba's UFC record, it doesn't read too great, but here are the people that have actually beaten him in the UFC. You've got Meerschaert, you've got Jared Cannonier, you've got Glover Teixeira, Ankalaev twice after that weird one at the end of the first fight, Ryan Spann, Johnny Walker, and Nzechukwu. They're all elite. Well, not quite elite, but they're all very good at least. I think the aggression of Ion is going to be an issue for Linz. I mean, the best way I can think to describe this is that Linz lost by a first round knockout to Tanner Boza, and Boza lost by a first round knockout to Kutalaba. I know they were at different weight classes, I believe, but still, that's a good way, I think, of explaining what I'm trying to say here. He's an absolute Moldovan fruitcake that's going to get nowhere near a title, but I think in this fight in particular, it's going to be a good one. I believe so, people. So if you want to really tune in for a fight on the early prelim, this would be one of my picks. But I'm going to go with Kutalaba with the first round knockout over Linz in the early prelim headliner in Miami this weekend. Moving on to another great fight and another fruitcake. It's Michel Pereira in his second UFC fight as a middleweight against who I like to call the mini Jan Blachowicz, Mikhail Oleksiejczuk. We all know Michel by now. The way I like to talk about him is he's effectively a nutty ballerina, just jumping about all over the place and fucking throwing his legs up in the air like a complete nutter, but sometimes it can be effective, and when it is effective, it's usually destructive as fuck. But Oleksiejczuk is a decent middleweight, he really is. In his last fight, he beat old Chidi Bang Bang, who is a similarly explosive fighter as Pereira, if not in a completely different way. He's a volume fighter, Oleksiejczuk. But against Michel Pereira, I just don't see it working out for him, because I think there is a level of opponent that Michel can do his crazy shit against and knock him out. I think Mikhail is just in that bracket, so I think Michel will finish him quite early with something nutty like he normally does. Next up, in the heavyweight weight class, we have got the debuting Roberto Spain against Josh Perisian. Now, if you haven't heard the name Roberto Spain, I may be saying it wrong. If I am, I don't really give a fuck. He is a Taekwondo machine, right? He's been competing in Taekwondo for his nation of Cuba for so long now. He was at the Olympics in London in 2012. He is 35, 36, I think, so not exactly on the right side of the age, if I'm honest. Josh Perisian is your typical fat, useless heavyweight. His BMI is probably higher than his fight IQ. Not a lot else to say. I think Despain is going to chin him, because I think Perisian, like a lot of the heavyweights that are not ranked, is pretty fucking useless. But Dana, Hunter, please, if he does knock him out quick, don't do what you just did with that ogre fucking Gazib and just throw him straight into the rankings. Give him something in between, please. I know that heavyweight's quite thin. Well, the division itself is, the fighters are. Most of them have got high blood pressure, but yeah. Just, I know he's a bit old, but give him at least one more and then give him a ranked opponent, please. I don't want another Gazib or another Abus Magomedov. No, thank you. Asu Almabayev against CJ Vagara, for me, is a bit of a mismatch. Almabayev is a Terminator. He's very, very good at 125. His ground game is good. His knockout power isn't great, but he's got more than enough to make quick work of CJ Vagara. Very quick. I'd say first round submission wouldn't shock me, to be honest. And finally, JoJo Wood. She's back. She's fighting Malin Marloes. She looked shit last time we saw her. She really did. I mean, the Luana Carolina fight, she just looked so slow and shit. Now, she was never particularly good in the first place. If I'm honest, no hate. She's from the UK, so, you know, she's got a high place in my heart. But does she still have enough to beat somebody like a Marloes? I'm going to say no. I think that Marloes, again, in her recent fight, she's looked okay. Nothing special. She's not going to end up anywhere near the title, but she'll have enough to beat JoJo. Unfortunately, I'd love to see a renaissance, but it won't happen for me. I'm going to go with a decision win for Marloes. Ladies, gents, boys, girls, that wraps us up. Hope you enjoyed the breakdown. This is probably my longest video ever. I've actually gone into some detail here. If you agree with what I've said, let me know. If you don't, you're the one that's wrong, just to let you know. But still, you know, leave it in the comments. I can always argue with you if I feel like it. But anyway, yeah, hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you very soon.